35 down Texas way, right past McMahon in Dallas to San Antonio. Well, I think we should point out that the Spurs, after getting a really quality win over the Golden State Warriors on Saturday night, have crawled above 500, 9-8.
Ooh, 43.4 win pace. I'm going to be eating good, old Bontemps.
We'll see.
Should establish where the bet payoff is going to be. I mean, is there going to be a?
We got a lot of time to sort it out still. It's better for the pod for it to
once they hit
continue.
the 30. Yeah, once they hit the 31.5 over under, we can
Yes.
settle on.
Yeah, soon it's going to be a 10.5 over under. The rate this is calling.
I will say that when we discussed this in the group chat, McMahon also tries to lower the over under. It's not just
Every
to the
time.
pot.
Every time, without fail.
Well, all I know is these boys have won themselves 3 straight, 5 of 7. Listen, obviously not an an unfortunate situation for Mitch Johnson to be cutting his head coaching teeth, but he's done a really nice job since having to step into that seat with Pop recovering. And I think that Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes have, their veteran presence and savvy and all that stuff has had an impact. And I always botch the guy's first name. Help me out.
Stephon Castle.
Thanks,
Just
guys.
call him Steph. Just call him Steph.
Because you've been saying Stephen way too many.
I screwed it up and I got a call from the Spurs.
Yes, that's what I anyway.
And ever since, I've just been calling him Steph Castle.
Point
Well,
being,
you can also just call him Stephon Castle, which is his name. It's not that hard.
point being, we're going to learn how to say this guy's name because
He's really good.
really good player, and you can't necessarily always see it looking at the box score. He definitely has had some good shooting nights lately, but his shooting numbers overall are not good. He just is a winner. He's a national champion at UConn. He's a hell of a defensive player. We'll see how good of a scorer he becomes, and that'll kind of determine his ceiling. But in terms of like being a defender, being a connector, being a guy who impacts winning, he's really, really good right now and has a chance to be awesome. And with
I loved him at UConn. He reminded me a lot of Drew Holiday. That's who, when you talk about all those things, that's all the stuff that Drew Holiday does, and he's got a chance to be a pretty dynamite two-way player like Drew Holiday too.
No question. And when they were in Dallas, which is the last win, Wemby didn't play in that game, and they got smoked pretty good. But before that game, I asked Mitch Johnson about Castle, and he said the thing that's impressed him the most is just his demeanor. And as he said, he's flatline in a good way. When you'll see this guy come up with like spectacular defensive plays, and it's just, he's stone-faced.
Also like Drew Holiday.
Yeah, he doesn't. And the same thing, when something goes wrong, he doesn't get rattled. And he is a really, really impressive rookie. I don't know if he's going to have the numbers to, get in that rookie of the year conversation with Jared McCain and with Dalton Connect and those guys. But in terms of a rookie making an impact on his team, extremely impressive. And I think the impressive thing about the Spurs being 9-8 right now, yes, Wemby's had a 50-point game, but like Wemby hasn't made this massive leap that maybe we anticipated in terms of, it's not like he's averaging 29 or 30 points.
His stats are basically flat.
Yeah, and the Spurs are a drastically improved team around him, and you're seeing that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's had moments. His stats are basically flat. Not what I was expecting. I was expecting him to go further. He was sort of penciled in as the most improved player, right? Like, isn't that what everybody was just assuming? And he might still do that. But I'll just tell you that, right now he's averaging 22.9. Last year he averaged 21.4. So a point and a half. It's not nothing. Same amount of blocks, same amount of turnovers, slightly less assists, same amount of rebounds. His shooting percentage is almost exactly identical. His 3-point percentage is up 1 percentage point.
Well, and again, he's taken way more threes than last year, way higher percentage of threes, and of lower free throws and more minutes per game. Goes back to the same conversation we've had a lot. I'm a big fan of Victor's ability to shoot the ball. I would love for Victor to do a lot more dunking at the rim and getting to the foul line, because he's an incredible foul shooter, and he's one of the most athletic 7'4" dudes of all time. One of the most athletic dudes you could argue ever, just with the way there's physical gifts. And the more he could play at the rim, I think the better off the Spurs will be in the long run. But, you know, that's a point we've made a lot.
They're playing pretty good on defense. They're a top 10 defensive team so far, with obviously Wembanyama as the back line guy there.
And Castle as the point of attack guy, which get used to that, folks.
Yes.
They're going to be a really, they've got a chance to be maybe the best defensive tandem in the league.
It's a very nice combo.
The Golden State Warriors, a dynasty built on dominance, now stand at a perilous edge. Steph Curry and Draymond Green, once the faces of certainty in the NBA, are now surrounded by questions. Brian Windhorst recently warned that the Warriors' grip on the league is loosening, and he's not wrong. Their missteps are piling up, and the narrative is shifting from glory to decline. Could this be the end of an era? Let's break this down, starting with the alarming silence from their brightest stars. The Warriors stars Steph Curry and Draymond Green are no longer the unstoppable forces we once knew. Steph Curry, despite reaching a historic milestone with 3,800 career three-pointers, has failed to deliver the knockout punches that defined his prime. His numbers are solid, but they now feel like empty calories in games where Golden State needs more than stats, they need heroics. Draymond Green, on the other hand, is a shadow of his former self. The defensive backbone of this dynasty is cracking. His intensity has wavered, and his mistakes, once rare, now feel inevitable. The turnovers, the late rotations, the inability to stop runs when they matter most, these are no longer one-off issues. They are symptoms of a larger decline. But it's not just the individual performances that raise red flags. There's a deeper, systemic problem, one that turns the Warriors into a measuring stick for their opponents, rather than the standard to chase. The Golden State Warriors, once feared and untouchable, have become something far less inspiring, a standard team. As Brian Windhorst pointed out, the Warriors are now a tool for other teams to gauge their progress. That's right, opponents now view beating Golden State not as a monumental achievement, but as a benchmark. This is the ultimate insult to a dynasty. When the Brooklyn Nets erased an 18-point deficit and took control late, it wasn't just about their improvement, it was a glaring sign of Golden State's vulnerability. How do we go from a Warriors team that crushed opponents with ruthless efficiency to one that regularly squanders massive leads? The answer lies in their instability. And it's this instability that has become the Warriors' Achilles heel, dragging them into a cycle of brilliance followed by baffling collapses. Instability, this is the word that defines the Warriors' season. For every moment of brilliance, there's a collapse waiting just around the corner. Against the Spurs, they blew a 17-point lead. Against the Nets, it was 18. These aren't isolated incidents, they're patterns, and patterns reveal truths that cannot be ignored. Steve Kerr himself acknowledged the issue, stating, "We need to execute better." But execution doesn't just magically improve overnight. The Warriors are averaging 14.6 turnovers per game, nearly identical to last season, and yet their opponents are now capitalizing on those mistakes at an alarming rate. 5 times this season, their turnovers have handed opponents over 20 points. These are not just losses, they are self-inflicted implosions. Yet, for all their flaws, the Warriors remain contenders on paper. But how much longer can they rely on their fading stars to pull them out of this nosedive? Steph Curry, at 36, is still a force. He's averaging 23.9 points per game on efficient shooting, and his moments of brilliance, like his 37-point takeover against Dallas, remind us why he's called the greatest shooter of all time. But is it enough? Heroic individual performances cannot mask systemic failure forever. Draymond Green, once the fire starter of this team, now feels more like a spark that occasionally flickers. His defensive reads, his ability to anchor the Warriors' schemes, these have all shown signs of erosion. Without consistency from him, the Warriors' defense becomes porous and their identity starts to unravel. So where does that leave Golden State? Are we witnessing the final act of a dynasty, or is there still time to rewrite this narrative? The Golden State Warriors stand at a critical juncture. Brian Windhorst's words linger like a warning. this team is no longer untouchable. Their stars, once the league's most reliable weapons, now waver under the weight of expectation. Their identity built on discipline and dominance feels increasingly fragile. The margin for error has vanished. If the Warriors don't confront their issues with urgency, this season could mark the beginning of the end for one of the greatest dynasties in sports history. The question now isn't just whether they can win, it's whether they can survive. The clock is ticking and the fate of the Warriors hangs in the balance. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Is this the end of an era, or can Golden State fight back one more time? Stay tuned for more NBA insights.